Hey everyone, this is Anthony Watkins, the co-host of the Buddy Movies podcast, and it's just me today. I am here doing a solo review. This is something that in our last podcast, which actually is not out yet, but we recorded it the other day, I discussed something I've been wanting to do for a little bit, and I just thought I would try it out here. I have done written reviews for movies that I've seen in theaters for almost the past 5 years. I started doing it in 2016, and last year, with all the movies being canceled, I kind of slacked off a bit on doing that, but I wanted to keep doing it, so I'm gonna start doing video reviews, and I may at some point go back to do written reviews, or maybe I'll be doing them both as time allows. We'll kind of see with how my schedule is, but I wanted to start out just trying it out and see how it goes. So this is A Quiet Place Part 2. So this is a movie I saw in theaters actually last Saturday night, and it just feels weird just saying in theaters. In theaters. I saw a movie in theaters. Anyway, I saw it in theaters, and it was once again a great movie experience. With when it comes to A Quiet Place, the first one holds a special place in my heart because it was when I saw the first one in theaters about 3 years ago in 2018. It was, and still is to this day, the best movie experience I have ever had, because it was during a sold-out movie, a sold-out experience, and because of the sound design, the movie itself. Anyone who has seen the first movie knows that sound plays an extremely important role in the movie, and because of the sound design of the movie, I felt too loud just eating popcorn. Just eating popcorn was too loud. People were starting to look at me when I was just eating popcorn, and that's when I got the feeling that, oh my goodness, this is an experience like no other. So I was very excited for A Quiet Place Part 2. John Krasinski returns to direct, and he is the solo writer on this movie. He co-wrote, I believe, the first movie, but he is the only writer for this movie, and he returns to direct. And boy, oh boy, this guy is insane behind the camera. He's just, and I've said it before, I don't know where this came from. Obviously, he was in The Office for many, many years. I love The Office. It's still my favorite show. I love him in The Office, but he ended up only directing, I believe, one episode in The Office. And he is just incredible behind the camera. He blew me away with the first movie, how he's able to just create suspense. And he did his homework, because there are many Spielberg-esque sequences in the first movie. And he continues that here in the second movie. Through the use of shadow, through the use of creatures slowly crawling into certain spaces with our characters. Just the build-up of suspense is non-stop in this movie. This movie is from start to finish. Just like the first movie, this movie is one suspense-driven thrill ride from start to finish. And I absolutely love that. I revel in that kind of horror. I'm someone who loves horror movies, but I only love certain types of horror movies. I don't go for the more gore-driven, lots super violent type of movies. I love suspense. I love being gripping the armchair rests in my seat, because I'm so on the edge and just wanting to see what's just around the corner, or what's about to happen next. And this movie, once again, just delivers on all of that, on all fronts. And you get to see a lot more of the creatures in this movie, which is something that at first I was unsure if I actually liked, because as someone who loves the minimalist approach to the filmmaking, I was just talking about Spielberg and how he did that so well, for instance, in Jurassic Park. Like, Mark and I did an episode on that earlier this year. And Krasinski, he shows a lot more of the creatures in this movie. But then I thought, well, we already know what the creatures look like. This isn't like the first Jurassic Park, where we hadn't really seen these dinosaurs before. We know what the creatures look like by now. We've seen the first movie. Anyone who's sitting in the theater of the second movie, I hope, has seen the first movie. So we know what they look like. We know how they move, how they hunt, and everything. So I was honestly, at first I was a little bummed, but then the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, I want to see these creatures out. I want to see them. I want to see the full force of what they can do. And we get a lot more of that in this movie. There are a lot of day scenes also, so he completely does not hide them at all. There are a lot of daylight scenes. I honestly would have preferred more night sequences like there are in the first movie, But still, daylight or night, there's plenty of suspense to go around in this movie. Also, the standout scene in this movie is actually the opening scene. It's actually a flashback scene with John Krasinski. This isn't a spoiler because it was in the trailers here. There's a flashback scene with how it all started, and Krasinski is in that scene with his family, and we get to see basically how it all began. And that is just to be able to see these creatures terrify the residents of this small town is just, it was a lot of fun to watch. Yes, people get hurt and everything, but it's still just for the sake of levels of terror and suspense and just the thrill of it. It was the opening scene to this movie is absolutely fantastic. You couldn't have started off the movie in a better way, I don't think. So yeah, direction once again is amazing. The sound design is top notch. It'll probably get nominated for another sound mixing, sound editing nomination at the Oscars next year. The score by Marco Beltrami. He returns the score of the second movie, and honestly, he uses the exact same score that he uses in the first movie. There's maybe a couple little notes here and there, and some songs and tracks that are maybe a little different, but for the most part, he uses the exact same score. And I'm not upset about that whatsoever, because the score, I forgot when I returned and watched the second movie here, I forgot how much I loved the score to the first movie. It was fantastic, like instantly iconic when you hear it. And the second movie just delivers on that once again. Just an amazing score by Marco Beltrami. And yeah, the negatives, I will say, this movie did not quite live up to my expectations. As good as it is directed and everything on technical levels, the story is definitely weaker than what the first one was. We don't have our characters with as much things to do as in the first movie, and the stakes overall still don't quite seem as high as what they were in the first movie, and characters are still put in these high-level, highly stressful situations, but it's not up to the levels that we saw in the first movie. They're not quite as isolated of places. They're not on their home farm like they were in the first movie, and they're in more kind of urban areas, so they're not quite as isolated as what they are in the first movie. So that takes away a little bit of the suspense, and just the story itself is definitely a bit weaker. We do get a new character from Cillian Murphy's character. I'm blanking on his name. Emmett is his name, and so we do get a new character and everything, but overall, it's definitely not quite as good as the first movie, unfortunately. So I got my hopes up a little too much. As the credits were rolling, I was like, okay, it's definitely a sequel. The first movie was fantastic. Still holds up 3 years later, and this movie is definitely one I will buy, but definitely a step down. And sadly, Krasinski will be stepping away from the director's chair for the third movie, so I don't exactly have high hopes for the third movie, but maybe I'll be surprised. I don't know. So, yeah, and there's also just some things that happen with characters in this movie where it's a trademark, it's a cliche in horror movies where characters do stupid things, but I feel like in this movie there's more of that than in the first movie. And some of it you can just kind of throw away to, oh, it's a kid doing it, so you can kind of forgive it to a certain extent. But overall, there's still certain moments where you're like, why are these characters acting like this? So that's a bit frustrating. And we're also introduced to this new group of people that are, as Wikipedia describes them, as feral people, which is a kind of a weird description. Basically, they're these people that you kind of expect to see on like Skull Island. If you've ever seen Peter Jackson's King Kong, you kind of expect those types of people. That's kind of just picture those, and that's kind of what these kinds of people are. We're introduced to this group of people who are very violent and very hostile people, and we don't really know where they come from or what their motivations are or anything like that. And they disappear just as soon as they appear. And I wasn't a huge fan of that little side bar storyline, if you will, in this movie. So we have that group of people in this movie. Also, there's a character in this movie. I'm not going to say which character. I'm not going to give spoilers for this movie, but there's a certain character here where they meet, they have an end, and it happens very abruptly and very suddenly, and it just feels a little bit out of place, and it felt like they were building this certain character to something, and then they just take their rug out from under you and they're gone in a split second. So that also I was not a huge fan of, because especially when you're building up a character, I don't know why you would just rip them out and take them out right away. But anyway, so those are a few of the complaints I had, but overall this is a very, very still great sequel. It is a step down. It is a step down from the first movie, but still a great movie. And definitely one I think you should see in theaters. Please do yourself a favor and see it in theaters. Don't go on streaming, watch it on your 40, 50, or even 60-inch TV. It doesn't have any comparison to seeing it in theaters. And actually, when I saw this in theaters, you will get a opening talking head by John Krasinski himself thanking you for coming to the theater to see the movie. So that should speak levels of just how much he wants you to see the movie. I was so glad whenever he postponed it last year and did not bow to Paramount wanting to put this on streaming. He wanted this to be in the theaters for you to enjoy. So please, if you liked the first movie and you're interested in seeing the second one, please see it in theaters. So thank you again. Thanks for watching the short review. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the Buddy Movies channel. Like I said, we'll see how this goes and see if I put up any more reviews. Mark may be doing the same. So yeah, thanks again for watching and stay cool.